This is the story of Anthrobotavian kin. Anthro, anthrop, human. Bot, botanical, plant. Avian, bird. Kin, a person's closest living relation, a group of persons descended from a common ancestor. Anthrobotavian kin is a design and life practice in response to Donna Harraway's text, Staying with the Trouble, in which she urges her fellow anthrops to make kin, not babies. As Harraway explains, the task is to make kin in lines of inventive connection as a practice of learning to live and die well with each other in a thick present. The word kin has at one time been tied into the context of genealogy by the Darwinian children of science fact, exclusive to biological anthrop families. But in order to truly understand and make better this ecologically interdependent world, we need to loosen this tie to also include the species that live alongside us anthrops, making kin as oddkin. As a design practitioner, I have found myself to be in a fortunate situation, having discovered a writer whose theory is so complementary to my practice. The two work in tandem, my practice interpreting her theory in a very deep and critical way. This is something I want to embrace honestly in the telling of my project, as she has provided me with the tools to go and play with kin. The project exists in spaces where multiple species practice homemaking, a shared place where a same group of bodies will reside or return to every day. Through regular encounters, faces, voices, and movements become familiar. Kin making is a process of getting to know, which creates local ecological communities of living, multi-species neighbourhoods growing over time. This project guides and teaches a practice for families, households, and neighbours, anthrop bodies of all kinds. Anthrobotavian kin is a story cultivated by Harraway's SFs, science fiction, speculative fabulation, speculative feminism, and science fact. Acting as a blueprint for making oddkin, it pioneers paths and open spaces for today's Earthlings and future generations of Earthlings to come, speculating on the multi-specie cultures that may flourish from decentering and rewriting the world's anthropocentric narrative. This rewriting of species lives needs anthrops to be caring, curious, and playful, like a child rediscovering the world for the first time. Dance with your kin, sing, speak, and write with them. Learn this future together and begin to tie your lives in new, unfamiliar, intimately familiar, imaginative, real, and possible ways. Synchronize your strayed anthrop body clock. Rid of curtains and tune into a botanical radio clock. Ancestors turn out to be very interesting strangers. Kin are unfamiliar. Yet so likewise, clockwise, sunwise. As an Anthrobotavian kin maker, know how our bodies are so alike and concurrent. Be aware of them in times ancient and up to the minute. Know the sundial of our ancestor that has still remained in the foundations of who we are as Earthlings. We are still all creatures of the light, living in circadian rhythms, cycles of clockwise circles, sunwise circles. Chthulucene is the first to rise. At 4:15 a.m, they wake me. As their leaves open, their rising sun plays to me on the radio. We stretch to soak the light. 20 minutes before the pigeons arrive, their feathers less sensitive than Chthulucene's chlorophyllid gaze. They come just before 5 o'clock, shuffling and conversing on the roof above my head. Janning comes down to my windowsill if I'm not out of bed by 5:15. We share faces for a while. He watches me doze, but, like Chthulucene, we are hungry to break our nocturnal fast. The day has begun as we all greet and eat. Within the Anthrobotavian body clock, there are 3 temporalities, encapsulated by each other like a set of Russian dolls. Think of a botanical body as the slow hour, an anthrop body as the mid-minute, and the avian body as the fleeting second. As a kin maker, be awake to and play in these temporalities. By speeding and slowing species tempos, it creates opportunities of becoming with one another. Experiments influenced by the unknowing kin maker Marcus Coates. Working in the digital sphere of film, this anthrop is able to enter and introduce species into each other's temporal landscapes. Temporal composting as a way of becoming. Through the augmentation of bodily motions and sounds, this process avianizes the anthrop, anthropomorphs the botanical, and botanifies the anthrop. Through these alien but deeply earthly becomings, discover and play in these spaces, hear and see your kin in new ways, the known invisible turned visible, the unknown inaudible turned audible. Compromised compost, as one is slowed and one is sped. Composting is slow. It takes time to make kin. It's a process of months, years and lifetimes. It took patience to understand the speed and motions of Calithia's body. Get to know your kin in specialized ways, in physical, bodily ways, acute understandings through the knowings of body clocks and temporalities. Again, know you were unfamiliar, but so likewise, ancestral earthlings. When you do this, you will sync your lives in whole new ways. Anthrops have only ever known botanical tempos and bodies through the narrative of science fact, patriarchic and anthropocentric. Still valued are the experiments and discoveries on the growth and movement in plants by J.C. Bose and Darwin, conducted on Calithia's great-great-great-grandparents centuries ago. Botanical motions abstracted by anthrop devices, exhibited into diagrams, species drawings, bodily writings, so rich in story but never read. Botanical kin makers rewrite and reclaim Darwin's practice in the theories of circumnation with the tools of SF storytelling. Multi-specie cultures are rooted in symbiotic creativity, symbiotic, making with, collectively producing systems that do not have self-defined spatial or temporal boundaries. Find opportunities to combine and collaborate your bodies in inventive ways. Making botanthrop chirographies, a kin-to-kin activity. The zine teaches anthrops how to produce drawings from the movement of their kin. Once designed by Darwin to diagram the growth and speed of plants, kin makers redefine these drawings as chirographs, which mean a type of handwriting. By realizing their movement as a form of body language, they acknowledge the species symbiosis at play, decentering the anthropocentric narrative. To be done in these days at home. The object of the zine ties the project into its current context of the lockdown home. The zine uses home as a workshop and its tools as resources, making it an inclusive practice, but also a self-made action, an act of multi-species crafting. Kin makers must realise that when reality is set free from certainty and science fact, it opens more fluid and possible spaces for science fiction and speculative fabulation. The zine's instructional nature plays with this, inviting anthrops to enact and momentarily become in a possible multi-species culture, botanical body language, transcribed and written into strange chirography. Now, read their language. Bring it into anthrop tempo with your anthrop body. In multi-species kin making, bodies become a tool of language. Botanthrop dance. Read and perform the botanical path with your anthrop body. Use one or multiple paths they choreograph, sew them into a routine. The arrows indicate direction, each loop indicates a turn. The line's length indicates the space your body stretches. The lowest and highest points indicate the high and lowest points your body should travel. You indicate the tempo. This is about your body too. Once practice, perform it to your kin. An echo of bodily language, you reply and converse. p.m, noon. The Anthrobotavian chorus is in full play, noisy creatures, vocal and mobile in their sunwise circles. Chthulucene leaves dancing and singing, showering in the light. I whistle and chitter as the pigeons chatter. Love and hate on the roof they now call home. Get to know your kin in specialised ways, in personal, fictive ways. Acute understandings through the knowing of faces and stories, like the closest of friends. Now knowing the tracings of botanical bodies, see how the avians are also living in motions of circumnutation. They home. Truly unpredictable and curious is this about our avian kin. In aerial terrains, their lines more tricky to trace than botanical ones. Their paths only become familiar over time from observational fragments, often from the window. You join the dots, but in different ways. Tom van Doren, in his book Stories for Lost Places, speaks of species' practices of meaning and placemaking. Avian lines become a form of storytelling, as traces of bodies coming and going, settling in places. They home to me. The roof of my house, now a site of pigeon placemaking, pigeon culturing. Species culturing creates stories of meaning, stories written on the roof from their hoving, conversations, partnerships, loving, arguments, chasing, rituals of cleaning and sleeping. I know the pigeons very well now. I know them by face and feathers, some without faces. I know them by names, I know them by sounds. As they descend from the roof and enter my anthrop terrain, we can place make and story make together. I'm trying to think of specific stories because it's all about the fact that we tie our lives together through stories and events.
I mean, for me, a moment that was quite amazing was when the three of us woke up in your bed, and it felt like such a family moment for me, where, I don't know, I used to sleep with my parents sometimes, and on Sunday we would be all in the bed, and then the pigeon flew in, and now the family is complete.
You came in and he started flying into the window. That was stressful.
Yeah, it was terrible. Really harmful for him, obviously.
I think he was fine. He keeps coming to my windowsill every morning now when I don't get out of bed early enough. Including them into those moments of our lives is really interesting. Stories are to do with morals and learning or knowing, making you understand the world through certain stories that we've had with them.
For me, I would definitely say patience.
Yeah.
Pays back.
Yeah,
that's what I saw and I learned from watching you.
Spock there was a time when I thought that Spock was a guy, and then all of a sudden I just saw her having a little bit of a sexy time, and bam, perception of her completely changed. She was immediately a matriarch, and I had this whole connection with her through her as a woman. Pigeons are feminists, and they are actually in a system of patriarch as well.
And they have to deal with it native, just like us, actually.
The dance I did with Pooja.
That time, I think that was really something that, I don't know, made a twist in the whole story of your kin making, I think.
It was an important moment, and maybe that's what makes a story, is the impact it has on a changing of events and people and relationships.
Exactly.
The effects of making kin are socio-cultural, ecological. Once you have become awake in body clocks, gotten to know your kin's faces and made stories, you may find yourself in surprising and lovely situations. Anthropotavian people are everywhere. Harraway perfectly states that kin making is making persons. In all of its social and ethical meanings, this is what kin making aims to do. As persons, your stories will start to spread into the wider world, and at one time what was a meaningless performance begins to become a meaningful happening. For the first time, you're walking down the street. You recognize a familiar body in the distance. Far from home, you both approach each other, a glancing eye contact of knowing, a recognizing, a surprising and lovely situation. Speak in body language to show them it's you. Greet them. They are your friend. Once they have been knotted, return to your own paths with an odd feeling that you are kin.